Welcome. I'm Dr. Maria de Blasi, a professor, writer, and bruja, and this is my virtual classroom, the Bruja Professor, where I offer my witchy take on literature, popular culture, and the occult. Today our topic covers a little of all three categories. That's right, I'm talking about haunted houses, specifically the idea of paranormal entities living right beside us in our most intimate spaces, and how the B horror movie Haunted House has unequivocally shaped the real estate market today. Whether you believe in ghosts or not, really, you should, but that's just me and my familiar talking, it's impossible to deny that they have taken up residence in our collective unconscious, offering us insights into the unknown realms of our psyches, hidden histories, and, sometimes, the beyond. We can't overstate just how important the image of the haunted house is. It's become a horror cliché, albeit a beloved one. Who hasn't seen some classic film where the protagonists stumble across a haunted house with signs leading up to it that say, "Turn back now"? For that matter, who hasn't ever entered a space that just felt off? If you've ever been house hunting, you likely have a few tales about houses euphemistically called quote-unquote fixer-uppers that look like a crime scene or the set of some slasher movie. Or maybe you liked everything about that move-in-ready house, except the vibe. The truth is, no matter how rational we like to think we are, there's always a part of us, some deep, instinctual inner knowing that reminds us that we are not alone in this world. That there are things, energies, specters, perhaps, wandering among us. And this is something we feel more deeply in the privacy of home, a space that is supposed to be a sanctuary from the world just beyond our doorstep. But what happens when the terror comes from inside a house? In Control, Anatomy, and the Legacy of the Haunted House, Jacob Geller unpacks our complicated relationship to the spaces we live in. We like to think we own them, but the truth is, sometimes, they own us. They are spaces that can devour us, spaces that contain the histories of so many people who came before us. In many cultural traditions, in fact, homes have their own spirit. In others, spirits or fae can inhabit homes. It's always best to have a healthy respect for those otherworldly energies, however you choose to define them. In most ghost stories, homes become haunted through tragic or violent histories, unsolved mysteries, unfinished business, basically all the stuff you think about when it comes to horror cliches. Sometimes, however, a haunting can be as simple as the energy of a place, the memories the walls soak up, and the sense that others have come before us. Or it can be our own psychological state mirrored back at us. Let's take Stephen King's novel and subsequent film adaptation, The Shining, for example. The Overlook Hotel is a dark and evil entity. The novel explains that the hotel is evil because it was built on an ancient Indian burial ground. I know, it's a total xenophobic cliché, but back to the topic at hand. That same darkness infects Jack, an otherwise good guy who turns evil due to the hotel's influence. The film, however, is less clear. Is Jack going insane? Are there hidden family traumas at play? Is Jack drawn to the evil in the hotel in some way? Or is he just some innocent victim? We see the same tension in the recent Netflix adaptation of The Haunting of Hill House. Is the family prey to a demonic house or terrible haunting? Or is untreated mental illness and undealt with trauma at play here? Or are these undealt with issues the very thing that drew the family to the house in the first place? To get witchy about things, or perhaps to merge the psychological and spiritual, are the ghosts calling out to people whose energies resonate with theirs? To paraphrase an idea from the Sci-Fi Channel's Warehouse 13, a show about collecting and neutralizing haunted objects, we can be metaphysically predisposed to certain things. The show was talking about objects, or what they call artifacts, that become imbued with certain powers based on the energies they've absorbed from the people and situations surrounding them. Sylvia Plath's typewriter? Yeah, you don't want to touch it. We then are drawn to certain magical energies and not others, generally speaking. And in the case of haunted objects specifically, Our personal histories and experiences can make us metaphysically predisposed to certain things, for better or worse. I find this is an apt metaphor for homes as well. Perhaps that is what makes haunted houses so scary to us. They are a mirror to our psyches, and nothing is more terrifying than gazing into a mirror and seeing darkness. Of course, the reverse is also true. Nothing is more cathartic than facing that darkness and conquering it, which is why I suspect the occult detective genre is so popular. It shows us that we can face the darkness in the world and within ourselves and defeat it. Oops, skipping ahead here. There we go. Now let's talk briefly about some other popular culture texts and how they shape our understanding of haunted houses. Specifically, I want to look at what I wrote on the last slide. The idea that homes are sanctuaries, the places we go when we need to feel safe and get away from the strangeness of the world. Haunted houses remind us, however, that the homes can be the least safe place to be, or to quote the 1979 horror movie When a Stranger Calls, sometimes the call is coming from inside the house. Likewise, as any lover of Gothic romance can tell you, the domestic setting can become all the more terrifying when this supposedly safe space is a suffocating space, a space that traps rather than protects. The major plot of most Gothic romance novels is the threat of toxic patriarchy and the terrors of our domestic spheres, the silent horrors that happen behind closed doors. It's where we get a lot of our uncanny elements in horror as well, from creepy kids to beautiful houses that just don't seem quite right. And speaking of Gothic romances, well, when we think of them, we think of the classic dark manor or strange estate decorated in early Victorian creepy style. The image of the Gothic Victorian house, interestingly enough, comes from the fact that as we modernize, old things, like those drab Victorians and their outdated values, became associated with the dark past, outmoded ideas, and yes, even barbaric beliefs. So as we left behind Victorian styles and ideologies, the houses that best embodied them became empty vessels that we poured all our psychological and social anxieties into. Plus, I'm sure one or two ghosts from that era were more than happy to hang around those houses. Funny enough, the Victorians and the Enlightenment era people before them did the same things to structures of their past. That's why, in Horace Walpole's The Castle of Otranto, the haunted structure is an old medieval castle. The medieval era became the dumping ground for all the Enlightenment era's fears and superstitions. But that's a story for another day. All this is to say that we often look to the past, particularly concrete objects and structures, to make sense of our present, and it's easy to project our modern fears, passions, and transgressions onto a past that seems more quote-unquote barbaric to our contemporary imaginations. Yet this history doesn't change the fact that somewhere along the way, haunted houses became, well, cool. Again, a lot of this has to do with pop culture. We get shows and movies like The Addams Family and The Munsters, which makes Gothic kind of ordinary and ghosts in a house an extra perk or amenity rather than things that need to be dealt with or exorcised. In other words, spirits in haunted houses that are more mundane rather than otherworldly are interesting, and, if you're lucky, something you can enjoy, like The Addams Family. And let's just circle back to those Gothic romances for a second. Let's be honest, with the development of Gothic romances, haunted houses, or at least Gothic houses, became kind of sexy. Made popular by the resurgence of the genre thanks to Victoria Holt's Mistress of Mellon in 1960 and the soapy Gothic drama Dark Shadows in the same decade, the Gothic romance made the once terrifying domestic sphere suddenly become a hotbed not just for potential ghosts and supernatural forces, but also sublimated desires, transgressive passions, and all the fun stuff polite young ladies of the era shouldn't want, but were eager to try. They harken back to the darkly seductive Gothic world of Carmilla, Dracula, and even the earlier Radcliffe romances, some of the original Gothic romances. In other words, By combining the paranormal aspects of a good Gothic tale with the strong love plots of a good romance, these stories help create a more romanticized view of the haunted house in general. So, where does that leave us with haunted house hunting? Well, you would think that creepy homes with signs in front saying "turn back now" would make people take that advice and leave. You'd also think we've seen enough B-horror movies to never trust it when someone calls a home a quaint fixer-upper. That's code for it needs a lot of work and is likely haunted. Or if your real estate agent gets you the deal of a lifetime on a house that just isn't selling, it was probably the site of a gruesome unsolved murder or is the lovely 3-bedroom property of a live-in poltergeist. Of a lively poltergeist, I should say. Before we get into making the most of the haunted house you inhabit, or how to shop for your very own little house of horrors, we first have to look at how the paranormal and pop culture have shaped the real estate market. We have some terms any home buyer needs to be familiar with. First, we have homes that have been psychologically impacted. That means a home's reputation, say assumed haunted, affects how people perceive it. So facts matter less than perception here. The next is buyer beware, which means a home is purchased as is, including defects. That might be a roof that passes inspection, but then you later learn, after you buy the house, needs some serious repairs. Or that basement you were hoping to redo and rent out for extra cash already has a spectral tenant. Basically, once you buy it, you get it all, including the unexpected issues and visitors. Interestingly, we also have to consider the emotional defects of a place, or the fact that deaths or other strange occurrences that happen in a home contaminate the energy of a space. Now again, you might not believe that those things can affect a house, but it's all about perception. If a person gets bad feelings about a place, well, that leads to plummeting property values, which leads to one of the most important real estate terms, the stigmatized home, or a property shunned because of its history. Think brutal murderers or former crack shacks. Think ancient burial grounds and poltergeists. The final and most important thing to know about haunted home buying has to do with the 1991 Stambovsky versus Ackley, informally known as the Ghostbusters ruling. It requires the owners to disclose the haunted nature of a home as it affects its value. The New York Supreme Court made this decision after some unsuspecting homeowners purchased a home that they later learned the locals considered haunted. Now, as a stigmatized property or psychologically impacted property, they could be stuck with a serious real estate lemon on their hands. Thanks to this ruling, however, homeowners are now required to disclose any hauntings or other history attached to a property that might decrease its value. Although the nuances of this can vary from state to state, so be warned. Here's what I find so fascinating about this. You don't even have to believe in ghosts or the supernatural to be impacted by the Ghostbusters ruling. In fact, this ruling is concrete proof that regardless of your belief in the paranormal, the unseen world has a direct and concrete impact on our lives. It doesn't matter if a person thinks ghosts are real. What matters is that others might. And that perception could impact a home's curb appeal. And yet, for all those issues surrounding haunted houses, both in pop culture and real estate, we can't deny that homes with spectral residents have somehow become cool. In part, this is because many of us know that there are ghosts and other energies surrounding us every day. We talk regularly to our ancestors or those who have come before us, so the idea of a ghost in our house isn't all that terrifying. Likewise, thanks to Ghostbusters, Buffy the Vampire Slayer, Supernatural, basically the rise of all things supernatural sleuths in pop culture, the paranormal becomes less terrifying. Should you say Bloody Mary 3 times in the mirror? No. But if you or someone you know is stupid enough to do so, well, your local Ghostbuster is just one call away. In other words, spirits and haunted houses are something that can be managed. Although, you have to be kind of careful with that. More recently, we have other media, like Juliet Blackwell's Cozy Haunted Home Renovation Mysteries, in which Mel, a home renovator who can see ghosts, helps the spirits of San Francisco's oldest houses find peace, resolve old issues, or just enjoy living alongside the new living residents, as one does. This series explores hauntings from a different perspective than the B horror movie. It shows the beauty of living in a place with quote-unquote history, read, ghosts, and how homes and objects absorb the energies and stories of those who have lived there. And to go back to the beginning of my lecture, how we are sometimes drawn to these energies for better or worse. Mel certainly is, as she finds herself drawn to homes where spirits need a little help. We see this even more transparently in excuse me. We see this develop even more transparently in the Sci-Fi Channel's recent series Surreal Estate, which follows the adventures of a company that deals exclusively in stigmatized homes. Some of them are even truly haunted. The only thing more terrifying than a haunted house in this series is a bad mortgage rate. Again, we see that playfulness entering in, what some scholars have dubbed millennial gothic. Best seen in the work of Tim Burton, pictured here is his 1988 cult classic Beetlejuice, in which the Gothic aesthetic is combined with a cheekier take on the supernatural. As a result of these shifting narratives of the haunted house in pop culture and the strings attached to buying a potentially haunted house in real life, we now have an interesting phenomenon in which people are actively looking to buy a haunted house. Why? Because it's cool. Just so long as your ghost is more like Casper and not, well, a demon from hell. For people wanting to maximize their haunted home hunting, Week and Weird has this Ghostbusters guide to buying a house. They suggest that you research the haunting, research the seller, research the location, perform a paranormal investigation, trust your intuition, get a second opinion, screw it, get all the opinions, ask yourself, is this really worth it? Have a backup plan. Never forget that some ghosts were people at one point. Honestly, I get the research bit. You need to know what you're getting into. If a house is really haunted, and if so, how dangerous that haunting is. But having a backup plan, asking if it's really worth it, well, let's just say home buying is hard enough without trying to figure out if it's safe to live in a place once you've purchased it. Say you do get that haunted home of your dreams. HGTV, home of all things, well, home, offers up some important advice for living in a haunted house, including don't be afraid, stay in control, research your ghosts, talk to the ghost, and be appreciative. My take, don't go looking to borrow trouble, as the old saying goes. I mean, some horror movies are classics for a reason. If the sign says turn back now, then you probably should. On the other hand, if you find a house that resonates with you and it just happens to have some spectral inhabitants, then have at it. Just make sure they pay their half of the rent. In the end, when it comes to haunted homes, we can safely say that regardless of a person's belief in ghosts, or lack thereof, the presence of the unknown or unexplainable has tangible impact on concrete spaces and legal matters. Homes are intimate spaces that make people more aware of the energy or vibes we surround ourselves with, and with our own emotional consciousness. Sometimes these spaces are frightening, a proverbial nightmare on Elm Street. Other times they're mystical, like the witchy homes in series like Charmed or Witches of East End. In either case, it's hard not to think about the power of this iconic horror movie setup and how it makes us rethink our relationship to our personal spaces. My theory? I think the rise in popularity of Monster of the Week TV shows and ghost hunter narratives, along with the aesthetic of millennial gothic charm, has increased the pull factor of occupying haunted spaces. We're also seeing things like witchcraft, paganism, and other spiritual practices becoming increasingly mainstream, which has the benefit of making people more aware of the energy around us and the fact that dead doesn't necessarily mean gone. All I can say is that now that I'm house hunting, the only thing more terrifying than the prospect of sharing a space with ghostly inhabitants is this killer housing market. I guess the spirits in my apartment are stuck with me and my familiar for a little while longer. That's all I have for you today on the Bruja Professor. Let me know what you think. Have you ever lived in a haunted house? By choice? Do you think ghosts are real? Thanks so much for listening, and remember, as I always like to say, true magic is in the everyday and a good story.